Hello, friends, and welcome to the Science of Art. I'm coming to you once again from inside the think tank. Had to get new treads after our last... You know what? I'm not going to get into the details. These are fireproof, all you need to know. So, Think Tank Voyage 4. This should take us someplace fun. Horror and comedy. The laugh mechanism. Nature's response to pain. There seems to be a pattern. Let me use a couple of examples and see if you can find it. I just noticed it recently, and I want to see if I'm insane. I know I'm crazy, but I need to clarify the latter before we move on. So, here we go. Walk into a haunted house. Friends clinging to your arms as you walk through. Guy jumps out, you scream, jump back, panic, and then you laugh. You watch a sad movie, you cry, you do some deep thinking, you reflect for a while, you get distracted doing something else, and eventually, you laugh. Your coworker is on top of a ladder. He slips, he falls, but somehow he lands on a stack of cardboard boxes that break his fall. For a moment, your life and his flash before your eyes. Your heart stops, your breath is taken away, and then, out of a pile of boxes, he looks at you. And you both let out a huge belly laugh of relief. Top of the ride, panic and anxiety. On the way down, screams and laughter. Tears heading into kindergarten. End of the day, laughter and new friends and a mouth that seems fueled by whatever SpaceX is pumping into their new rockets. If it's Falcon 9 and heavy, it's kerosene and liquid oxygen. And if it is the Starship, it is liquid methane and oxygen. Anyways, so, if you haven't noticed, there is a bit of a pattern in how humans seem to react, and maybe even some who choose to respond to pain, fear, anxiety, and grief. Our bodies seem to go through a system, an algorithm, if you'd like, on how to respond to these things that follows a simple rule of the universe. Everything vibrates and moves in waves. All you have to do with anything is look for the rise and the fall. Peaks and valleys. I've got my highs and my lows, and that's relative. Everybody wants to be on top of the mountain, and nobody wants to be at the bottom. The paradox is clearly laid out by nature. Sure, the accomplishment is being able to rise above the challenge and make it to the top, but do you really want to be at the top of the mountain? The weather is lethal, there's no oxygen, the terrain is something from a nightmare. You fight tooth and nail to be the only person at the top, which in itself just sounds lonely. And once you get there, what then? But then nobody wants to be at the bottom, until they stand at the top of the mountain, which may as well be hell. But that is supposed to be below us. Now all I want is to go back down to the valley, where the weather is temperate and warm. There's peace down there, food and shelter and warm things. Oh, how miserable the valley is when the peak is so glorious. Again, it is all relative. But so is the concept of fear and comedy. You take any film, play, story, even a joke, apply the right setting, tone, presentation, and soon you have a horror story. And the same can be said for any nightmare. Flip the script, and that is some of the funniest shit you'll ever see. Why? Well, I honestly wish I had a good short answer for that, but no such luck. You're stuck in here with me. Seriously, I don't recommend getting out of this thing while it's moving. Anyways, let's take a look at what is going on with us peoples. You get scared. Energy moves to your lowest energy center, triggering cortisol to flow and kickstart an adrenal reaction that signals fight, flight, or freeze. Your energy ping-pongs from the deeper feeling body to the upper thinking body, back and forth trying to analyze, decipher, and contemplate every worst-case scenario, saving the best-case scenario, hopefully for the next step. The body retaliates to the information it is perceiving in the moment. It sends the data to the brain really quickly, and it registers, fuck, we need to survive this, and the only way we will survive this is if we are happy with what we are doing and having a good time. We need to give the brain something to release the right chemistry. And then, the brain begins to start coming up with one scenario after the other, and in the worst possible time, at a time when it couldn't be more inconvenient, as a defense mechanism, you start laughing at the funeral. Oh, sure, people turn and look at you upset that you're breaking some sort of social decorum. But the truth of the matter is, you are having the most honest, genuine, and actually medically, therapeutically healing response you could possibly have at that moment. And also, the most human. Why? Let's break it down. In that moment, based on other people's conditioning, they are taken aback by your response to pain. And because of that conditioning, this is seen as improper behavior. And that fear of rejection, because it's improper, as seen by the tribe, is projected onto you. And the hope is that you in turn will feel that fear and have a chemical reaction like the one they are having, and you will stop in your behavior that caused them to have that reaction. But you aren't them, because you don't react out of fear. You respond based on what is needed. And believe me, everyone in that room could use a good laugh at that moment. They're just too afraid because what will people think? But you aren't other people, so you laugh. Why? Because you aren't dwelling on what makes you grieve. Grief is exhausting, and what the hell does it do for their spirit, the one trying to leave this realm and fly high above the misery we fester in down here? No, this spirit wants to fly high, and do we let it? No, we drown it in our sorrows and our misery and longing for it to stay in the land of the living. But then there's you. You who think about all the good times, the times you sang and danced and made love and war and all the silly things that human beings do when being human. And so you laugh to your heart's content. And you know what happens? Oxytocin, endorphins, dopamine, and my all-time favorite and champion of all the happy chemicals, serotonin. What sounds more appealing to you? Sitting grieving what you think you have lost and promoting the degrading chemistry that has you replaying the same nightmare over and over again till you eventually die in a panic, terrified of the exit on your inevitable way out? Or taking a look back at all the ridiculous delusions of superiority, the notions of righteousness that kept you rigid, the rules you chose to uphold to conform to society, the proclamations of sanity in an insane world just to seem normal in an abnormal culture full of freaks dressed in monkey suits attempting to assure you with insurance. Seriously, can we take it any more seriously? Here's what AI has to say about fear. And again, I have to clarify. My immediate reasoning for this direction in education is not sheer laziness, but collective agreement. I want to hear what our offspring, this child of intellect, this monster of the mind, has to say on what we all conclusively agree is the science of fear. Fear works as a rapid, protective alarm system. Sensory input triggers the amygdala, which signals the body's stress response, fight or flight, via the hypothalamus and adrenal glands, releasing adrenaline and cortisol for faster heart rate, breathing, and alertness, while higher brain areas, like the prefrontal cortex, provide context to differentiate real threats from imagined ones, creating a complex interplay of immediate physical reactions, focused attention, and learned responses. 1. The brain's alarm system. Threat detection. Sensory information, sight, sound, goes to the thalamus, which acts as a relay station. The quick route, shortcut. The thalamus sends a fast signal directly to the amygdala, the brain's threat detector. The slow route, context. The signal also goes to the cortex for deeper processing, the slow route. Amygdala activation. The amygdala immediately sounds the alarm, triggering the body's response before the cortex fully understands the situation. 2. The body's fight or flight response. Hormone release. The hypothalamus activates the adrenal glands, flooding the body with stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. Physical changes. Heart rate, blood pressure increases. Breathing quickens, pupils dilate, muscles tense, and digestion slows, preparing you to either fight the threat or flee. 3. The role of higher brain regions. Prefrontal cortex and hippocampus. These areas provide context, memory, and reasoning, helping to calm the amygdala once the threat is assessed as non-existent or manageable. Learning and memory. The brain learns from the scary experiences, with the amygdala and hippocampus working together to form fear memories, deciding what situations are truly dangerous. 4. Neurochemistry. Glutamate, an excitatory neurotransmitter that sparks fear circuits. GABA, an inhibitory neurotransmitter that helps put the brakes on fear. We're going to take a closer look at GABA at some point. It's on our list of things like ATP that we're going to analyze a little bit closer to see how much of that we can actually hack ourselves. So we actually have our hands on the dials of chemicals that are making our bodies do things. So, as we just read, just like all the processes of our bodies, from trigger to sensory stimulation and then from brain activity to physical action, we are basically seeing the algorithm of fear play out as our body is programmed to do, based on our general organic layout as a functioning operating system. But, then again, we may have the same hardware, but clearly not the same wiring. Some of us are wired for fear to be, well, a very terrifying experience and something most people are uncomfortable to ever feel. And then there's some of us who get a real rise out of fear, an almost orgasmic high, the epitome of sensory stimulation. Fuck, it's better than sex to some people. Why? Power? Control? Or possibly just an intense flood of chemistry into the system that the only way you can ever get that high is on your own supply, and you need to shock the body in order to get there. For some, DIY electroshock using an old car battery seems to do the trick. Oh, dear listeners, the smorgasbord of delights when it comes to all the tantalizing terrors and delectable dangers that bring rise to the chemical cocktails that bring nightmares to be. Yummy. So, why do some of us seem to have a desire to steer clear of fear, and others have a proclivity for panic? We'll touch base on that in a bit, but for right now, let's banter about laughter, shall we? As we've exposed fear, let's look at its antithesis, and sometimes the appropriate response to fear. Laughter. How does humor work? Once again, I've asked the almighty Everybrain what it can tell me about humor. Humor works through a complex interplay of cognitive processing, psychological triggers, and psychological responses. It primarily relies on the brain's ability to recognize patterns, detect errors, and resolve unexpected contradictions. 1. Core theories of humor. Psychologists and philosophers generally categorize how humor works into 3 major frameworks. Incongruity theory. This is the most widely accepted explanation. It suggests we find things funny when there is a mismatch between what we expect to happen and what actually happens. Laughter occurs when the brain successfully resolves this surprise by finding a second, hidden meaning, like in a pun, or by realizing the situation is absurd. Superiority theory. Dating back to Plato and Aristotle, this theory posits that we laugh at the misfortunes, mistakes, or ugliness of others because it makes us feel momentarily superior. Relief theory. Pioneered by Sigmund Freud, this theory views humor as a release valve for pent-up nervous energy or psychological tension. Laughter is seen as a way to safely discharge energy related to taboo topics like sex or aggression. Benign violation theory, BVT. A more modern, unifying theory which suggests humor happens when something violates a norm, social, moral, or physical, but is simultaneously perceived as benign or safe. The brain on humor. Understanding a joke is a high-speed, multi-step process involving several brain regions. 1. Left hemisphere. Analyzes the words and logical structure of the joke. 2. Frontal lobe. Brain's director that searches for pattern recognition. 3. Right hemisphere. Performs the intellectual aha moment to get the joke. 4. Nucleus accumbens. The brain's reward center, which triggers a burst of dopamine when the joke is successfully processed, creating a pleasurable feeling. Side note outside Deep Thought's little explanation, this is why you feel a pang of panic when you don't get a joke, because your brain is registering a signal of rejection, and seeing as we are still working with 200,000-plus-year-old hardware that hasn't really changed in a drastically rapid-changing world, we still register rejection with physical death. Back then, if you didn't get it or couldn't keep up with the program, you were rejected. And whereas back then rejection meant exile from the tribe, which included safety, shelter, resources, food, and community, and certain death due to exposure, now it just means you still feel the imminent danger of rejection, but we, for the most part, could survive just fine. Our bodies say otherwise. But where we used to function based around the fear of being eaten if we didn't stick together, now, despite our bodies being afraid of being dino food, today we just get into a real funk. We give off signals and smells that suggest we aren't worthy and therefore result in our own perceived unattractiveness, which can lead to either people finding you unattractive because that is how you view yourself, or you attract someone who is unaware of something needing fixing in themselves and they try to fix you instead. Neither is a good result. So, if you ever start feeling really bad after not getting a joke, just remember it's just your body being afraid it's going to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger and that it is nothing to worry about. You're just driving a very old, outdated model. Our goal together is to upgrade ourselves along the way. Anyways, back to the teachings of the almighty Everybrain. Social and biological function. 1. Social bonding. Laughter is highly contagious and acts as a social lubricant, signaling safety and acceptance to others. Humans are 30 times more likely to laugh in groups than when alone. 2. Evolutionary advantage. Some scientists believe humor evolved to reward the brain for finding mistakes in our belief structures, essentially training us to think more flexibly and solve problems. 3. Health benefits. Laughter triggers the release of endorphins, natural painkillers, and can reduce levels of stress hormones like cortisol. It also stimulates organs like the heart and lungs. There is a vital importance to both fear and humor in our societal structures when it comes to survival. Fear can keep us on task and focused on what is good for the group, keeping us in line and progressing for fear of always being left behind. Humor is the glue that holds us together, helping us feel safe and relaxed around our peers, and allowing us to find links in our forms of communication, creating clearer and stronger bonds. But a body wound up in the chemical hormonal habits of stress and survival based on how we perceive our waking reality, which also impacts our sleeping reality. You can sleep all you want, but if the body is still triggered by stress, you aren't really able to enter REM sleep and therefore you aren't really resting. This causes the body over time to trigger our genes to create disease. We rely on the fact everything moves in waves, and, like breathing, you need to exhale after you inhale. Otherwise, imagine trying to just keep inhaling. You'd eventually explode. Or exhaling and then you'd completely deflate yourself, like a meat sack balloon. You get scared or stressed, your body tightens and prepares for whatever danger is coming. If you stay in this state for long enough, your system forgets how to relax all that tension in the body. Imagine you were at the gym and you were tensing your muscles trying to hold a plank or some other form of isometric exercise. In fact, do it right now. Tense every muscle in your body as hard as you can for a total of 10 seconds. I'll do it with you right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And now just let go and relax your body. You can feel heat, blood flowing back into areas where you were... Sorry, I gotta take a second. Whew. Now, you can feel heat, blood flowing back into areas where you were restricting that blood flow. You might even feel a little warm, comforting sensation as the body releases the appropriate chemicals to counter the stress response. That relaxed sensation coming from endorphins to help start the repair process. Now, imagine never letting that tension go. Every muscle tensed up all the time, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, even when you're asleep. After a long enough time, you've told every cell in your body it needs to respond to stress, so the cells simply keep responding as if they are under attack. But you also need to realize, if you remember when you relaxed how you could literally feel fluid flowing through your body once you release the tension, if you aren't allowing your body to release that tension, it also means you are completely restricting the flow of any blood, oxygen, nutrients, water, even electrical energy required to heal damage in the body. Do this long enough, you stack stressors on top of stressors until it becomes a habit that eventually just turns into disease in whatever part of the body you tell that stress to accumulate. Having financial troubles and you feel like the ground is vanishing beneath your feet? Your lower back, kidneys, our body's filters begin to develop issues, and we live in a place of constant lack. Our fight or flight mechanisms are always active because we never feel like we have enough. This ends up activating certain parts of our brain that make us feel like we always have to be going out and spending or hoarding or just keeping resources that we really don't need that are actually slowing us down because we have too much stuff around us. We're not thinking clearly. We're surrounded by clutter. You're probably also stacking additional chemicals and behaviors that add more stress than they relieve. Your physical body begins to tell you the world is dangerous and you need to slow down. So you drink to calm the body, making you dehydrated and forcing the body and kidneys to work even harder, causing you to stress more and stay on the couch. So now the body isn't moving. It becomes stagnant with all the garbage not getting properly flushed out. You experience a lot of grief and guilt and remorse. You begin to trigger heart disease in the body because you're holding on to that tension in your chest. Fear of not being good enough, survivor's guilt, always feeling like you've lost something. So how does this relate to fear and laughter? Well, nature gave us an incredible algorithm that acts as a reset button for the body. Something stresses you out, you get scared. You recognize it as something that needs to be stopped because it is causing discomfort. You either remove yourself from the experience into a different environment, allowing the body to cool down so you can address it with a clear mind, or anger takes over, and you do everything in your power to stop whatever it is causing the discomfort. Either way, the body is craving stillness, quiet, calm, peace. One of two avenues lead to different habits or defense mechanisms, both having value but needing balance. Laugh too much, you don't take anything seriously. You get mad all the time, take everything too seriously, and you are just an angry person and incapable of finding the humor in anything. You're either an idiot or an asshole. Tears come, another form of releasing tension in the body so room can be made for critical thinking. Why did this happen? Did I do the right thing in order to handle or deal with this situation? Who am I on the other end of this experience? Do I want to be someone who just reacts all the time and lets my body tell me what to do when anything happens? Or do I take a beat to understand the feeling and then respond accordingly? Find courage in the face of fear and push forward anyways till the problem is solved? Or do I make light of the problem, seeing that if I don't let it be something to stress me out, I'll be able to address it from a place of play versus panic? Laughter arrives to help with the final step in addressing the problem. You've reframed it in your mind to show you something you didn't see before, something that makes you laugh, and eventually, you re-examine the problem in a completely different state of mind, therefore creating a completely different reality. But through all of this, all your body is doing is breathing. Hyperventilating when afraid pulls in more oxygen, helping your muscles perform better, making your brain clearer, and assisting the heart in pumping the right chemistry to help you perform. Laughter is the same thing. Your chemistry is activated. You're gulping in large quantities of air. Shit, when you put them on paper next to each other, both fear and humor almost act in exactly the same way. Both signal arousal. You just frame it differently in your mind. But both are simply mechanisms to becoming hyper-aware of what is happening and then the mind coming up with the best psychological response in order to deal with it. Ever see how some people get really pissed off and start making a big scene whenever they get hurt, and how this affects the people around them? Everyone suddenly becomes very aware, a sense of danger, and not everyone is necessarily in fear for the person or the thing that hurt them. A lot of times people are taken aback by the person and their reaction, a response that seems like a trigger in itself. Does this person seem approachable? No, you want to make sure they are okay, but you also find yourself kind of wanting to steer clear of them because they might aim that anger at you next just because you were in the line of fire. This doesn't signal a person who is self-aware or in control of their responses, so it's best to stay away till they've calmed down. This is also likely a person that, once the ball gets rolling, they start pulling in outside things into the mix that have absolutely nothing to do with whatever just happened. Now angry at absolutely everything and everyone. And the worst part of this? It's extremely addictive. Look, we all go out one day, but how would you like to leave, and how would you like to leave it all behind? After a long enough time, the body will identify the stress as part of its identity, and letting it go means part of you is dying. It is completely illusory. That means later, when you start to notice something is wrong with how you operate, it becomes harder and harder to let go of that tension and stress wound up in the body because you've convinced yourself it is who you are. But it isn't. It's probably not even happening right now. You just keep telling yourself it is because it feels familiar, and familiarity feels safe. So even a behavior or habit that is killing you over time will still feel like safety over the new, different, healthy habit that the body tells you is dangerous just because it is different, unknown to the body, and likely to cause our instant demise. Truth is, if you did it the day before and the day before that, the mind will put it in the future as an expectation. And when the danger isn't there, the mind doesn't relax and say, oh, thank God the danger isn't there today, and maybe if I keep doing this, it won't be there tomorrow, and because I don't have to worry about it today and I've already survived yesterday, maybe I can drop the danger and do this thing instead, and maybe over time, if I do this enough, the danger won't be there, or at least when it comes around again, I'll have found another better way to deal with it, and over time, I'll get better at this habit to counter the bad one. No! The mind instead begins to panic. Where is the thing that is always there? And if that thing isn't there, what horrible thing will be there instead of the thing that is always there? The real fucked up thing is you may have learned healthy habits, but you just practice the bad ones long enough, you reinforce these grooves in your neural pathways so they're just locked in more. You can break them and reshape them through forming new habits, but depending on how long you've locked yourself into the other identity, building a new one can seem nearly impossible. But if you start, something else happens. You've opened Pandora's box and there's no going back. Trust me, the limbo stage is the worst, living in the old habits where you don't want to be, but it feels familiar, and living in the new world where you want to be, and yet the old body hates being there, so you're stuck in the middle, knowing there's no going back. But you aren't 100% in the new reality yet, so you feel like you're stuck between two magnets, being pulled in both directions till the new habits stick, because you know too much now to go back. Even when biology tries to pull you back, logic begins to hack biology, your higher brain functions giving you such definitive facts that your feeling mind begins to argue with your higher mind like a pouty toddler that can't argue with the calm adult who actually asks the toddler questions it has to answer in an emotional state, each answer forcing it to think rather than feel until the toddler is calm now, no longer having an emotional reaction but responding in a more curious nature, the brain saying, pay attention, this is interesting. The same can be said for the person who laughs it off, as if they've learned some evolutionary hack to being stressed all the time, using their minds to objectively analyze reality in real time to figure out, how can I turn this chemistry on its head, knowing it will actually help me heal even faster? For after all, isn't laughter the best medicine? You smash your finger. It triggers the brain through the experience of physical pain. Quick, do I choose anger so I spike my adrenaline and then I aggressively attempt to address the situation, likely moving in erratic movements that will likely cause myself or someone else harm because I'm not thinking, I'm reacting and having a feeling about it? Or do I step away and counter the adrenaline with happy chemicals that confuse the brain? Quick, Let's laugh about it, and now the body doesn't know what to do. You've confused it, and because you've confused it, it naturally finds the situation even funnier. You've caused a different chain reaction to the one it expected from past habits. The likelihood is you've also taken a step back from the issue. You're addressing the pain with laughter, not the issue with anger. And when you do this, where is your attention and therefore your energy? If it is on the injury and you're releasing tension and placing your energy and attention to the area that needs to heal, you've just freed up all of your energy and nutrients to flow to that part of the body rather than just pushing it really quickly outwards in a burst of anger. Sure, in your anger, you may have tackled the situation and maybe even triumphed, but over time, especially if you do this again and again in a day's time, the body won't recognize when it is time to relax, carrying that tension with it into the night, and eventually, when it is time to rest, you can't. Your body is still hyper alert and ready for danger. It thinks back on the experiences of the day in a state of panic, problem solving and preparing itself for failure, versus laughing about it and allowing the body to find its natural rhythm of tension and release. Two scenarios. One where you keep thinking about having to prepare yourself for the next day, it's coming again, and I just always expect it. Or really looking back at it and going, whew, glad that's over with. Now it's time to relax. You can even look back at some of those things and laugh about them. Look at the alternative habit. You smack your finger. Everyone holds their breath because they are waiting for the reaction to be explosive, angry, and maybe even a little violent. But instead you respond with humor, perhaps even behaving the same way but in a goofy fashion, explosive, angry, and a little violent. But you learned a trick. If I get everyone else to calm down first and laugh at me, their positive energy, their flood of happy chemicals, which remember, our skin, the largest organ of our body, soaks up those chemicals that are now airborne, and this triggers our body to respond in kind. Remember when I talked about Black Friday and how feeding frenzies start? Of course you were on the other end of the TV declaring that would never happen to me because you can't fucking smell it. Do you know why shame is actually a more attractive emotion on people than happiness? Because shame is usually the emotion that is paired with doing the dirty when you weren't supposed to, or you did an act that brought intense pleasure at the expense of someone else. It releases pheromones. Usually that intense high in arousal is met with an emotion that brings a low vibration, and human animals, smelling the residue of sex and seeing the emotional signals of having just been highly aroused, signals us to then become aroused ourselves. Because sex is a survival activity, usually signaled out of a place of lack or instinctive need to continue the species, which doesn't always mean we are thinking clearly. Usually impulsively, resulting in high-risk behavior we otherwise wouldn't do in our right mind, leading to shame and pheromones. Someone who's happy is giving off all the opposites, with a body that is giving off energy. It isn't in a dip after sex, which creates a vacuum and therefore an attraction, a pull. It's also releasing serotonin, which doesn't tell the body it is in a place of lack, but one of abundance and fulfillment, and says, I don't need a damn thing right now. Means there's no risk, no high that can be had from this interaction. I have nothing to offer them, which means they don't want me, which means they have nothing to offer me, in a sense. This is grotesquely repulsive to someone who is themselves in a negative place, and misery loves company. So naturally, if I can bring a low vibration to the table that is built out of base arousal and survival responses, which are natural and automatic, requiring zero brain power, they're just our body's automatic operating system, that will be the fastest route to getting high rather than having to meet someone in happiness, especially when they're happy for no apparent reason and don't seem to need anything. Well, that requires more effort, it seems, to get where they are. Especially if I feel I have nothing I can offer them if they're already in a state of not needing. Fear kicks in too because you realize you might not be in a good state of mind, and the last thing you want to do is infect that person with your problems. So, Shame seems more attractive because it requires less work on both parties. You can just fuck each other and be miserable without any critical thought. Just two meat sacks bumping uglies till you peak and then dip. Coming back to your senses long enough to realize you just did it in a dirty public place just for the intense rise you get from doing something you aren't supposed to. To be clear, being healthy is fucking boring. But the long-term benefits definitely outweigh the prolonged habits of horniness. But what does this have to do with fear and humor? Everything! Because even though we're getting into a lot of different responses that the body creates, it is all connected and interlinked. One chemical says, I need more of this, and another says, I've had enough and I'm content. Your autonomic nervous system breaks it down very simply. Sympathetic is fight or flight or freeze, and the parasympathetic is rest and digest. It all comes down to listening and paying attention to your habits when things happen, and deciding which, out of all the unconscious learned behaviors and habits, you would like to choose to identify with to become the person you were always meant to be. But that must come through trial and error. Experimentation, my little scientists. Remember, feel the feeling, but don't become the emotion. I'm going to tell you something right now that is very important. The lie has been that fear is a tool to keep things moving, but fear is only intended to do one thing, to force something to stop moving. That being said, it is important to remember that fear can be used in a number of ways, both good and bad, and it is up to the person and how they choose to use their experience to influence and shape reality itself. It can be a great tool for good, but that is personal fear. The ability to use your body as a hypersensor that you use to tell you what needs to be done. Where you feel the most fear, we tend to find distraction and procrastinate, not because we are lazy, but our body is trying to find a reason to keep us safe. But that fear is trying to tell you where the opportunity to evolve is by showing you where the top priority lies. The more afraid you are of it, the more it demands your attention. Rather than being afraid of fear, we can use it to harness our energy and, with laser focus, hone in on that priority. Now, with a rush of chemicals that makes us faster, stronger, sharper, and more aware of our surroundings than we ever thought possible. But you need to allow yourself to sit with the fear itself, so you can feel it, study it, get to know every chemical personally so you have a more intimate relationship with it rather than it being this alien thing out to confuse and destroy you. Fear is there to say, hey, pay attention, this is important, and to say, we got this. You focus your attention inwards and are able to pull energy in from your surroundings and use it to push through and overcome. There's that courage we were talking about. But fear can also be used improperly and for evil means. This is used by people who understand what fear is and what it feels like and are able to in turn be able to weaponize it and turn it against others. Humor keeps things moving. It is a yes-and catalyst for chain reactions, momentum towards the next moment, the next beat, finding the rhythm. There's no tool more powerful in the human being's arsenal for living a long, happy, healthy, and rewarding life than finding every possible reason to laugh, to find humor in even the darkest corners of our hearts. And you don't need to fear what others think. It's not for them at that moment. It is for you. If you find yourself laughing at someone else's expense, this is also a calling to look inward at what karma waits for you down the road. Too often, we find ourselves laughing at someone else's expense, thinking life has finally landed some cruel joke on someone who deserves it. But that only comes back around in the end, possibly through the same action falling upon us. Others we thought were in our corner now laughing at someone else's expense. This turning the mirror of ugliness back on ourselves. Do we look at this and reflect on our reflection, or do we then in turn push back with blame, not realizing it is just the mirror of our own previous behavior? When we do it, it is okay because we're justified, but that behavior will return and show itself back in the reflection of others. And too often we point blame at them, not taking the time to recognize the reflection of ourselves in others. Keep this in mind when you try to shift the spotlight. He who is without sin, cast the first stone. Nobody? Okay then. Let's work to show each other some grace, compassion, and understanding. The things we don't like when we look at others are simply the reflections of ourselves we don't like. And when we see that in others, we try to shift the attention from ourselves to that person, hoping others won't look at us long enough to see those darker shadows in us. And the truth about those darker shadows? We all have them, and they're all in there. It is just choosing to take a beat and ask ourselves, what are they showing me that is already in myself? And rather than judging them for what is coming to the surface, how can I see their struggle right now with patience and compassion? Knowing what's in them also exists in me. Not just that compassion for them, but really for yourself. And then rather than reacting at a harsh judgment because in that moment they are only showing that they are afraid and didn't have someone to teach them a better path, will I just add to that bullshit with my own bullshit till all we are doing is blaming each other and literally projecting each other's darkness onto one another? Okay, enough of the soapbox. Trust me, I'm working on it too. That's why I'm bringing it up. I'm not exempt from being human. I'm just observing it in myself and seeing it reflected in all of us. We choose to see what we choose to see. So just be mindful of your choices. It reflects what is inside. And if you don't like what you see outside, chances are you have some serious work to do inside first. If we perceive everyone outside as ugly, what does it say about what is going on inside of us? I'm going to leave you all with this. For anyone who is interested, I've added a link in the bio to the Mayo Clinic's Guide to Stress Relief Through Laughter. Fun little read for anyone who needs help. Didn't know there was a thing called laughter yoga. Apparently, that is when people practice laughter together as a group, first by forcing it, and then eventually it just becomes genuine laughter. Makes sense. If you're around a bunch of people in a circle, all giving really bad fake laughs, I'd probably start to lose my shit too. Anyways, check that out when you get the chance. I've also added a link to a SKYPE laugh chain that is worth a watch if you're just needing some help in your day. One of my favorite pieces of advice I've been given, and for the life of me, I just can't place the source, but the key to living a good life is each day cry about something, think deeply about something, and laugh about something. Congratulations, you've hit all the marks of feeling and truly being human. So, wherever you are on the planet or in the universe, vibe high, friends. See you next time. Nope.